Sarah Jeong is out at the New York Times editorial board, and this news is breaking just in the past couple days. For those that aren't familiar with the context, Sarah Jeong was hired by the New York Times to be on the, I believe it was technology editorial opinion board, and she has a history of racist tweets. Very racist, very offensive, and she's also just a mean person, right? Like, I've routinely engaged with some of these people on Twitter, and boy, are they nasty. I'm not saying it's only them, please calm down. I'm just saying they are nasty. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people are trying to play this up like she was fired. We don't know if that's true, and it's likely not true. The reason is she's still on as a contractor writing for the outlet, which means she probably wasn't fired. If she was fired, they'd sever all ties. She probably just moved on. It's not a big deal. People move on. And you know what? Fine, good. The New York Times shouldn't have fired her in the first place. She shouldn't be fired over her being a bad person. We should all calm down, and let bygones be bygones. Now, I think it's a bad sign when the New York Times hires more people like her who are overt racists. Fine. But something interesting happened. There was a call to boycott the New York Times. And Sarah Jeong kind of defended it. Not really. And everybody immediately thought she got fired because of it. But the truth is, what actually happened is that she was out as of August. So let's calm the rumors down. However, I do want to talk about the swamp. The swamp that is media. See, the other day I made a video talking about how BuzzFeed defended Aaron Calvin. This is the guy who tried to cancel Carson King. Another story I'll give you the quick context of. Carson King has raised $1 million for a children's hospital. It was an accident, but he made the best of it. He's a good dude, and he's donating all this money. So this guy, Aaron Calvin, dug through his Twitter history 8 years ago and found an offensive joke that he sent to his friend. Excuse me. It was a reference to Tosh.0. It was very offensive. I get it. Well, when Aaron Calvin turned out to also have very offensive tweets, he got fired. What did BuzzFeed do? BuzzFeed wrote a story called that I would say is the epitome of technically the truth. You see, what BuzzFeed does when it comes to, say, someone like Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, is they strip the context out. When it comes to someone like Count Dankula, they will strip the context out and say, in the instance of Sargon, they said that he talked about assaulting a woman. Instead of saying he made a joke about media pressure that referenced to past. The point I'm making is, by all means, criticize Sargon for making the joke, for sure. But let people know what actually happened. When it comes to this guy, they make sure you know what happened. Now, here's the point. Think about the world that Sarah Jeong lives in. For years, she was posting racist commentary. And when she gets hired by the New York Times and there's outrage over it, what does the New York Times do? Well, they defended her. I think it might actually be in this story when they say that they reference all of the things she said that were offensive. Oh man, it's kind of sick how I get joy out of being cruel to white man, stuff like this. They go on to say, the Times said in a statement at the time that it stood by its decision to hire Jeong and had reviewed the writer's social media accounts prior to her hiring, while calling the content of the tweets unacceptable. Quote, "We hired Sarah Jeong because of the exceptional work she has done covering the internet and technology at a range of respected publications." All right, let's talk about grandstand in the heat. Do I think everyone in media is holding hands and working in a secret cabal behind the scenes? Of course not. But many of them know each other. They defend each other as an industry, courtesy. And many of them do hang out at bars. I know because I've hung out at the bars with them numerous occasions. Now, it's really funny because some of the pushback I got is, you seem to think there are patterns where there are none. No, there's clearly a pattern of behavior. Sarah Jeong for years puts out extremely offensive racist tweets, and the New York Times has no problem with it. This journalist tries to destroy someone's life because of 2 jokes he made 8 years ago, and BuzzFeed runs a technically the truth piece, which is a defense of him. And this guy worked for BuzzFeed, okay? So let me ask you with these standards. Why is it that when Sarah Jeong has all these offensive tweets, they defend it, it's fine. And when this guy calls someone else out for offensive tweets, they defend him. Let me explain what I mean by defend him, for those that missed the other video. This story is all technically the truth. They mention things that are technically true, like they say that it was right-wing ideologues. Let me pull this up. They say, soon, influential right-wing media figures also began circulating screenshots of Calvin's own past offensive tweets that had been uncovered. Sure, they make it seem like it was all about the right coming after him, that he's being harassed and doxxed and death threats. But the initial outrage this man was met with was from local Iowans who were outraged that he was targeting this small town hero who raised $1 million for a children's hospital. So again, Sarah Jeong, defended by the New York Times. Aaron Calvin, criticized a guy for his tweets, had his own tweets uncovered, defended. Okay, let me stress, this story, technically the truth. You see, what you'll hear from these journalists is, all we did was get his side of the story. Okay, I agree with that. That's fantastic. I'm glad you did. Why was it when you talk about, say, Dankula and Sargon, you don't get their side of the story? You just take the jokes out of context, smear them, refer to them as the worst possible thing, imaginable, and then try and frame this guy as under attack by right-wing, ideologues. I'm sorry. It's about a pattern of behavior. Now I understand. The reporter who did this story, it's Julia Reinstein, is not the same person who has smeared Carl Benjamin. And I understand that. And so this is not a dig at the individual. In no way am I trying to criticize the individual who wrote this. Now, the individual who wrote about Sargon and all that, yeah, I get it. And the individual at the New York Times who hired Sarah Jeong and defended her, yeah, that's critical. I'm critical of that too. This is a reporter doing her job. Okay, I get it. You got his perspective, you framed it from his point of view, and it makes him look like a victim. The problem is what BuzzFeed News as a whole chooses to cover and how they choose to cover it. When you talk about people on the right having bad tweets as having talked about assaulting a politician, and then you talk about a guy with also bad tweets saying it's blown out of proportion, and it was right-wing ideologues surfacing them, and that he's being a victim of harassment and doxing. You see the point I'm trying to make? The media industry is a swamp, okay? That's why Sarah Jeong was able to stay at the New York Times for as long as she did, and that's why she wasn't fired. People are saying that she was fired. There's speculation. This tweet, actually, that I saw was Sarah Jeong out at New York Times after tweeting defense of boycott or something like that. And people were saying well, if you tweet racist things, they won't fire you. But if you threaten the bottom line, they will. They did not fire her. Okay, let's read a little bit. They say Sarah Jeong is no longer part of the New York Times editorial board. An editor with the newspaper told CNN on Friday, with the writer maintaining that a tweet she sent this week was not a call for people to unsubscribe from the paper. Sarah decided to leave the editorial board in August. Deputy editorial page editor Kate Kingsbury told CNN on Friday. Now, you don't got to believe them. I'm just saying that's what they report. But we're glad to still have her journalism and insights around technology in our pages through her work as a contributor. That is the point. She will still contribute. She was not fired. And that is the point. The media industry is a swamp. It is a swamp of people who cycle around getting hired company after company. Now, there are some people they really like who are routinely slammed and smeared by people on the right. And I roll my eyes, and sometimes I do push back and defend some of these journalists. They're not all bad. But I stress, it would be very easy to find people who worked for, the New York Times, and then went to Vox, and then, went to Fusion, and then to the Atlantic, and then to the New York Times, and Washington Post. They bounce around all of these jobs so long as the opening exists. They operate not like competitive industries, but like partners working together. They are not operating in the same capacity a free market operates. Why is it that the Washington Post, for the most part, won't call out other outlets? Now they have. The Washington Post, the New York Times, they've called out other outlets. They've called out CNN and such. But let me tell you a story. When I worked at Fusion, I came across a very interesting bit of journalistic malpractice. A writer for the New York Times had completely altered a fact-based news story into an op-ed analysis. That is an egregious violation of journalistic ethics and internet norms. And what ended up happening is that I was told to drop the story. I was told to drop the story because, quote, we do it too. Okay, a paraphrase, not a real quote, but I was told, people will call us out if we're doing the same thing. And I said, wait a minute, you mean that we do the same thing? You mean to say that we will change a story after the fact and alter it without notifying our audience? Yep. Now, this individual who told me to drop the story, when I worked for Fusion, he got a new job afterwards. See, he told me not to call out the guy from the New York Times, so, I didn't. And it wasn't necessarily because I was, scared or they put pressure on me. It was that I didn't know if the story was big enough to actually do anything with anyway. I mean, I put a tweet, right? And I have. But are we going to write something up saying the New York Times did this? I mean, honestly, I just didn't know. And without their support, I said, okay, fine. I guess we'll ignore it. So he told me not to call it the New York Times. Can you guess what company hired him? Did you guess the New York Times? Yeah. The media industry is a swamp. And the swamp needs to be drained, but it can't be. It's a private sector industry, and they circle around all these people. They hire their buddies. Sarah Jeong worked for The Verge, which is a Vox property, then goes to work for the New York Times. We get it. What's she going to go work? She going to go work for BuzzFeed next? I wouldn't be surprised. Anyway, she put out a tweet saying that the New York Times does pay attention to subscriber cancellations. It's one of the metrics for outrage they take to distinguish between real outrage and superficial outrage. What subscribers say can back up dissenting views inside the paper about what it should and should be. That's not what she was out at the company a long time ago. I'm pretty sure she's blocked me anyway. I don't think she's a good person. I think she's a snide, elitist, mean individual. I think she's racist. Fine. But she wasn't fired. And people need to accept that she wasn't fired and realize the media industry is a disgusting, bubbling swamp full of swamp monsters that won't hold each other accountable. They'll only do it when their bottom line is threatened. Stick around. I'll see y'all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thanks for hanging out. Podcast at 6:30 p.m.